Alright, so in this video, welcome back to my kitchen. In this video we're going to make sauerkraut. Sauerkraut is a product made from cabbage with a bit of help from bacteria. The sour of sauerkraut means sour and the kraut means cabbage, so this is going to be pickled preserved cabbage with a nice sour taste. To make sauerkraut you need cabbage, you need some salt, you're going to need some jars or something to put it in to ferment and store, and you're going to need a good sized bowl, a chopping board and a knife. You're also going to need something to pack the cabbage into the jars once it's ready to go, and you'll see that later on. I'm going to try and find a smaller jar that fits just in through the neck here, and I can use that to push the cabbage down. But you can use a back of a spoon or anything really. Okay, so first thing I've done is I've gone and washed my hands because I'm going to be handling the cabbage, and I don't want to get too many different fungi and bacteria on it. I want to use whatever's already in the cabbage, on the surfaces of the cabbage. So preparing my cabbage, I'm going to take the outer leaves off. These will go in a compost, and then I'm going to just quickly wash the cabbage. One of the things we're going to find with this is we need to use an amount of salt. That's nice and accurate, or if you get our sauerkraut will either be too salty or it won't draw enough of the liquid out of the cabbage as we produce, as we start the process. So we're going to weigh it. Got some kitchen scales here. Let's put this on here, zero the scales. So it's, put this amount of cabbage in here. That weighs 630 grams. If I take that out from it, that weighs 500 grams. Between them, 1,108 grams. Now, when I go to make my sauerkraut, I want to use 2% salt by weight, which means that if I've got 1,107 grams, I'm going to need 22.5 grams of salt, or 22 or 23 grams of salt. So I need to remember that, 23 grams of salt. Okay. First step in my sauerkraut making is I need to chop up my cabbage nice and fine. So here's cabbage. I'm going to cut it into small sections first, as fine as you can. Being careful not to chop your fingers. Slicing up the cabbage. Half a bowl of cabbage ready. Pan here. marginal in terms of how fine it is. So don't brush this now. Brushing with the ear. So what's going to happen here is we're going to salt this cabbage, and the process of osmosis, you can pick up if you want, will cause the moisture from inside the cells of the cabbage to come out through the walls of the cells to try and even up the salt levels inside and outside. So this cabbage, once we salt it, is going to make its own brine. And the cabbage is going to go in this real crunchy texture to be a bit softer as that happens. It starts to bust some of those cells. And so that's part of the thing of sauerkraut. It's like a soft cabbage, but still slightly squeaky, and there's a nice salty, sour taste to it. It's really good on hot dogs. Here we go. So there's my 1.1 kilograms of cabbage. Now in this bowl here, now we need 22 grams of salt. So I'm going to put this on my scales. 0 the scales there. And you can make sauerkraut. Sauerkraut's like kimchi. You can make it with other things as well. So this is just standard table salt. I'm watching the scales. This is 12, 18, 22. Now what I need to do is I need to mix this up. I'm going to use my hands. I want to mix that salt through the cabbage, but I'm also going to gently massage the...
Okay, and about now my audio failed, and so I'm having to record audio by overdubbing. So I've got my cabbage, and I'm going to continue to give it this massage, trying to work the salt all around it. And the massage also starts to break open some of the cabbage and allow the salt around more of the cells, which is important because the salt is going to help suck moisture out of the cabbage using osmosis, and possibly even causing cell rupture by that same sort of process. Actually no, cell rupture would be when the water goes into the cabbage and causes cells to pop. So it's pulling the moisture out of the cells into the saltier environment around it. This is going to help create a brine, a salty liquid that will be useful for reducing the potential growth of bad bacteria, the bacteria that we're going to want to use. The bacteria that we want can live in the salty environment. Now I'm going to go and wash my hands before completing the next bit, which will involve just covering this up and setting it aside to let the salt go to work and pull more of the moisture out of the cabbage. We want it to produce enough brine to be able to cover the chopped cabbage once we pack it into the jars. Okay, so let's set that aside and come back to it in about an hour's time. Right, here we are an hour later. Got to uncover it. Here we go, the cabbage. Let's have a look. There's a bit more liquid in there. So now let's continue to massage it. It's looking a lot softer, and sure enough, it still produces a slight squeakiness, but there's a lot more brine in there now. I'm just going to squeeze some more of the liquid out from amongst the pieces of cabbage. And from inside the cabbage, it's really started to go to work. And you can see the amount of moisture that's been pulled out by the salt. So it's getting close now to being able to put it in the jars. That should form a nice brine, and it looks like there's enough there to cover the cabbage in the jars. Just scrape it off my hands here. Okay, set that aside. Go and find the 2 jars. Here they are. And now we're going to pack got the lids for the jars. We're going to pack these jars with the cabbage. I'm going to place them on a board first to protect the jars because I'm going to put a bit of pressure on them. And I've got this other jar that actually fits down inside the opening of my 2 jars, my 2 AG jars that I'm used to pack it. So now the process of packing, take some of the cabbage, leaving behind the brine for now. We can put that in after. So keep stuffing this cabbage into the top of these, open top of these jars, pop it in there, squash it down a bit with the fingers. Keep squashing it down, squash. You can see that quite a lot more goes in than you would expect, and I haven't even got around to really packing it in with the using the base of the other jar yet. Now with these jars, I prepared these jars similar to the jars for yogurt. I'd place them in the oven for a period of time to heat them up above 100 degrees and kill off any bacteria or fungi that I don't want in my sauerkraut. Here I'm going to squash pack the cabbage down into the jars using the bottom of this other jar, and that'll provide me some more space to fit some more of this. You can use a similar process to this for other pickled vegetables, cabbage, daikon radish, beetroot. You can put all those things together if you want. You can add some garlic, some herbs and spices. You can add chili. I think if you were making kimchi, you would include perhaps some fish sauce as one of the sources of the bacteria. Once we continue packing it, pack it right up to the brim and then squash it down a bit. Use up all the remains of this cabbage. And so this is going to provide the microbe environment. The cabbage that I've just put in there is going to be the food. The bacteria are going to secrete their enzymes and break down the cells of the cabbage, break down the cellulose. Slowly they're going to release sugars. Those enzymes are going to release sugars for use by the bacteria. Meanwhile, the liquid that we've produced, this brine, is going to provide that environment for the chemical reactions and the enzyme reactions to happen. The bacteria are going to be able to absorb those nutrients from the breaking down of the cabbage, and then they're going to use those nutrients in producing more microbes, but so as the building blocks for more microbes, but also as the fuel source for their respiration. Their respiration is going to produce lactic acid, which is going to give the sauerkraut its nice sour taste. The enzymes are going to work on the cabbage and make it nice and soft, which is also one of the goals here, the texture. So I'm going to keep on pouring. I'm going to pour this extra brine here over the top of the cabbage in the jars to cover it. That should keep it protected from any bad microbes. The salty environment, the brine, is sufficient to suppress some of the potentially adverse microbes that could instead try to take hold here, so that the bacteria that we want, which can live in this salty environment, can dominate this jar. Now, what else is going to happen in there? Oh yes, we're going to see some, as with all these things, we're going to see binary fission. So once we put these jars away to sit and ferment, the bacteria are going to go through their process of growing until each bacteria cell has grown in size to approximately twice of its original size, at which point it will split by binary fission into 2 cells. And that process goes maybe in good conditions every 20 minutes. Now this is not going to be heated up, so it'll be going slower than that. But over the course of a day or two, we should start to see some real fermentation happening. We're going to put these lids on these jars, but not really tightly, because that process, once it starts going, once the respiration starts happening and it produces lots of carbon dioxide as well as the lactic acid, it's going to start bubbling in there, and we want to allow it to overflow slightly. We don't want it to build up pressure and pop the lids off. So just loosely on there so that the juices can spill out if necessary. And we set it aside, and it's ready to go, and we can come back in a day or 2 days, and hopefully it'll be, well, after a couple of days it might be ready to eat. Maybe it would take as much as a week. So we can leave it there. After a few days we'll put it away in the fridge, and then it'll be ready to eat.